Okay, let's move to the to the interview. So my first question is, what was your core principle and your main goal while thinking about the next game, next Arkane game after Dishonored? So you finished Dishonored 2, you finished the DLCs. I love them, by the way. And then what? No Dishonored 3. Why? Why you went? What was the idea?
Oh wow, I think that's more of a question for Dinga actually. At the time, I was still doing level design. I finished up on Death of the Outsider, and I contributed to Wolfenstein Youngblood for maybe about 8 months, and Deathloop, or the project that would become Deathloop, was in pre-production for a while, and I really wasn't in any of those meetings or conversations about like why this game, why this topic. I know that the leadership that we had at the time, who were brainstorming this next project, really wanted to do something that was like risky and experimental, something like to test us, because we had just spent the last bunch of years basically remixing Dishonored, but always very still true to the Dishonored formula. So we had a blast making the Dishonored DLC. Like, let's explore. Now you're the villain. Now let's do Dishonored 2, or now you're the Empress. Let's do Death of the Outsider, where now you're this this renegade
Billy,
person who lives in the shadows. Like, okay, we got really comfy making those games. Let's now test ourselves. Let's get out of our comfort zone. Let's do something wild and unexpected that's going to test our skills, test our creativity, test our tech, and say, even if this game is a colossal failure, at least we failed doing something that taught us something. Like, we learned, we grew as developers. So like we honestly set out to say, like, if we're allowed one fail, like, I don't know if this was the actual conversation because I wasn't in, but the feeling was like, if we're allowed to fail once, what's the game that we're going to fail on? Like, let's do something really different, really really out, like, something we haven't seen before. Let's not just like say, okay, what's Arkane's version of Deus Ex? What's Arkane's version of Thief? What's Arkane's version of System Shock? Deathloop was really, what's Arkane's game?
So it was like your game. It wasn't an adaptation of something. It was like it came from the core of the company. Have you had an opportunity of working for The Crossing with the Crossing?
No, Crossing was before my time. I did play The Crossing though when I was very new to the studio. They're like, "Oh, you want to play The Crossing?" And got together and played through the prototype of that.
So I remember, I remember when Crossing was first announced, and it was like a complete mind blow. The idea of having this very weird kind of multiplayer. Is that a direct inspiration for the multiplayer in Deathloop? Was that the kind of a love child, brought from The Crossing?
I think it was more like we always knew that there was multiplayer in Arkane's DNA, even though we had never shipped a game with multiplayer. But that was a really important project to the studio. A lot of people still really loved the idea and loved working on it. So we knew that it wasn't like a radical left turn for Arkane to work on a game with multiplayer in it. And the multiplayer aspect of The Crossing is similar to Deathloop in that it's still a single player campaign and there's a multiplayer element, but the actual implementation of the multiplayer in The Crossing was much different than what we do in Deathloop. So it's not like a one-to-one, but it's more like we know this is something the studio always wanted to try. So like, let's see what that looks like now in this game.
It's funny because Deathloop in its core, it's not a stealthy game, and it becomes a stealth game when another player joins. This is the moment when I started playing this as a regular, stealth, like Dishonored and
even without the invasion, I still play stealthy.
You do?
by heart. Oh yeah, sure. I
I
enjoy getting the drop on the enemies. But yes, it's true. When you're invaded, the way you play completely changes.
completely changes. Yeah.
You get really,
Actually,
really careful.
I had this moment when it clicked that it's a time loop and I can do whatever I want, which is the good ending practically. Which I have a question about endings as well. And this moment I stopped playing stealthy and I started basically just running around like throwing people, all over. Let's move to another question. So it is hinted that Deathloop and Dishonored share worlds. It's kind of a strong hint at the end. So why didn't you decide to tie both series in a more obvious way? So why isn't a direct tie-in into Dishonored series, even though it is set? I think it seems that they are set in the same world.
We did really want to focus on Deathloop's strong, unique identity. We wanted to give this game world its own feeling, its own vibe, its own charisma that could exist completely separately from the Dishonored. So the world was really envisioned as its own thing. So the connection to Dishonored, maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but the point is the players get to experience something new and fresh. And if you want to see that connection, there's things you can look for there. Or maybe you've never heard of Dishonored and you've never played it and you're experiencing this like fully unique, like complete world that like you could enjoy Deathloop 100% without ever knowing about the Dishonored games.
Understood. Fair enough as well. Okay, so your favorite visionary and why?
Oh gosh, that one's tricky. I'm a little partial to the visionary that I had the most hand in creating, which is Alexis Dorsey, because I
Touche.
worked on the Deathloop prototype. I did the level design for that, and my main contribution to the prototype was creating the entire scenario around Alexis Dorsey.
So
So
Abdam in
like
general.
there was a couple of level designers working on the prototype, but my mandate was to create this masquerade party that was radically different from the previous masquerade party that we had done in Dishonored 1.
In Dishonored 1. So Alexis, and actually my original question was, what was your favorite visionary and why it's Alexis? So I kind of,
Why
I
the
see.
yeah. I'm
And why
partial
Alexis?
to Alexis because like it's
Because you
the
created.
visionary. I did the most work design. I didn't create Alexis, to be clear. That came from the narrative team. But things like you can no, I don't want to do spoilers in this interview, but the different ways that you could like make him reveal his identity. I invented all of those.
Nice. That's actually the most, I would say, Dishonored part of the game, because you have all those, different access to
Yeah.
the mansion. Like I found one completely by accident during an invasion. I've seen a guy running through the place and like, oh, there is an entrance there. Okay, so another question is kind of tied into to the last one. So what's your favorite part of Black Reef and why?
I have a real soft spot for Juliana's mansion that you go into
Juliana's
the
mansion.
tutorial map. Yes, I wish you could spend more time there. I would occasionally pitch to the team reasons to bring the player back to that location. Nothing ever really stuck, but I really just love the design of the place. I love how just kind of calm it is in comparison to the rest of the island. I love the combination of the old and the new, which you see throughout the game. You see that in Frank's club. You see that in Alexis Dorsey's mansion. Um, I really enjoy seeing that in real world architecture. You see it a lot in like New York City, where they'll build a modern building on top of an old building. You'll see it in Paris too. Really any city that's old enough, and they're going to leave the building there and build up above it. So I enjoyed seeing that in Juliana's place and Frank's place and so forth.
Alrighty. So what was the hardest part of the game to design?
The hardest part of the game design was basically my entire job, which was the
Creating
whole
the whole
murder
campaign.
puzzle. The whole murder. Really, the hardest part was designing the first like 2 hours of the game. Getting the player from this very clear point of you wake up on the beach and you don't know what the fuck is going on, to this other moment that's way over here where you have a plan. You don't know how to accomplish it, but you have the plan. And getting the player to that other point was tremendously difficult, and it took the entire span of the production to nail down. And we iterated on it and changed it so many times. We started off with a very minimalist version where we just kind of drop you in, and then again we got super handholdy with it, and then we tried to dial that back. Like, okay, we have the combined difficulty of we have a very unusual structure to the game. How you choose where to go and when is different, so we have to teach the player that. We have a different like world and narrative. We have to introduce the player to that. We have the like the immersive sim gameplay mechanics, which, like, if you've played other immersive sims, you just slip right in. But if you've never played one before, if this is your first immersive sim, that's a huge learning curve to figure out, like, how does this game want me to play it? So like accomplishing all three of those simultaneously, while like bringing the player to the point where they feel like they're ready to tackle the game's main challenge of like, you have to break the loop. It's not just going to be mission 3, mission 4, mission 5, end. It's going to be, okay, player, figure it out, go. That was incredibly hard, and we discovered over and over that as soon as we solved the biggest problem, the next problem appeared. Then the next problem was the biggest problem, because it's like yeah, it's like once you put airbags in cars, then everyone's breaking their legs because before they were dead.
Yeah, that's basically the whole idea of making video games. You fix one thing and another thing breaks, or there is another thing that you have to think about, which you never thought about before.
Yeah, exactly. And we were solving problems right into the last minute.
Okay, so what was the biggest missed opportunity while designing the game? Like, what was something that you really, really wanted to have in, but you didn't have the time, or it wasn't technically possible?
I would have liked to be able to have more moments where the game opened up to the player's like own ingenuity and intuition. Moments where there's a lot of times throughout solving the puzzle where if you just want to shut off your brain and follow the markers, you can. And occasionally there's a few moments where the game like checks in on you to say, hey, are you actually paying attention? I would have liked to find a way to make that a bit more more consistent, in that there's really like I want to make sure the player always has the help that they need to figure out what to do next. But whenever I see a player who's just mindlessly following markers and not thinking about what they're doing, I feel like I've failed as a designer. Like that's not a satisfying way to play. That's not satisfying for me to see you playing the thing I designed. So if I had, I don't know, let's say hypothetically another year to work on Deathloop, I would focus on like taking all the things that I've learned in the last couple of years and applying them again to the user experience of how are you experiencing this puzzle? How are you making the solution feel like yours as opposed to something the game is giving you? I don't have the solution to that right now. I'm very proud of what I managed to accomplish in the time we had.
Well, you should be.
But looking at what the how the players are reacting to it, I see tons of people saying that it was perfect, it was just right, they had all the guidance that they wanted. They never felt lost, and that was very satisfying to them. But then there's the other half of the players who are going, I wish the game trusted me a little bit more to solve this on my own terms. I'm like, yes, I'm with you on that, but like I did the best I could.
I think that the problem basically lies in the markers. You know that there's this huge discussion going through the general industry about having or not having markers, and how do you approach navigation on the levels, and how to point players in the different directions. Thing is that if you get rid of the markers, the latter half will get lost in the game. Or the former, actually. And if you don't do it, then basically people will get lost in it. Okay. What's the greatest pride when looking at the reception of Deathloop?
Oh wow, there's so much.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like one thing that
Um,
stands up, like what you're like really, really happy about people catching, discovering or noticing.
I'm very happy that this is something that I hoped would happen. People are discovering just the joy and the fun of the
Hmm.
formula in ways that were maybe a bit less accessible in the Dishonored games because those games were so focused on
Hmm.
the perfection, on getting that perfect run. But the problem is that you play Dishonored through one mission at a time once, and you never get a chance to go back and play it again. So you're not allowed to have the perfect run in Dishonored. So what you end up
Hmm.
doing is just save load. You just save load, save load, save load. So you don't ever get in. Like this is absolutely not true for some players, but I watched other people playing and they're constantly save loading. You never really get into a flow state of the
Hmm.
game when you're playing like that. And like Deathloop, I feel like we finally like introduced the players to what this can feel like to just roll with
Hmm.
your failures. Like let it be messy. Like let the situation cascade into like unknown, unreasonable, unmanageable just crap. Like it's so much more exciting and it's so much more fulfilling. And then you play through it again with more skill, and you
Hmm.
get closer to that perfect run. And I've been delighted to see players like grok that finally,
Hmm.
and I'm hoping that the people who loved Deathloop can go back and play the Dishonored games with that mindset and say like, actually,
Uh,
you know what, Corvo sometimes he messes up and it's okay. Sometimes Emily messes up, it's okay. Let's roll with it. Like, oh no, I made a mess. It's still
I'm
fun.
I'm wildly smiling because my next question is actually connected exactly to what you said. And well, you should be familiar with the YouTuber called Stealth Gamer BR.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Yes. Okay. So I had this when you first introduced Deathloop, when you announced it, I had this strong impression that basically Deathloop is taking his gameplays and making a game out of it. Because what he did is exactly Deathloop. He took a level and he perfected it. And when you are looking at it, it's exactly the idea of being in a time loop when you know where the enemy will stand, when you know what will happen when you do something, and basically putting it in motion. So wait a second. Is there any influence in Deathloop, like uh,
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
conscient influence from his
There's
contributions?
there's quite a few of the
Hmm.
I don't know what the term is for them, like the skill gamers or whatever.
Hmm.
There's quite a few, but yes, certainly the open topic was
Hmm.
how do we help more players be able to enjoy the game the way these players are enjoying it, to feel like you've got mastery of the
Hmm.
space, of the systems, of the tools, of the danger, and pull off those like badass moments that normally you just see on
Hmm.
YouTube. That absolutely went into the game design of Deathloop.
Well, actually, when I first played it, I wrote on the Twitter that this is the first game where I'm able to play like Stealth Gamer BR.
Good. Very
Okay,
happy to hear
so
that.
it worked out. Like basically, like this is also what I told you about the moment when it clicked, when I realized that I'm in a loop and I'm free to do whatever I want. That was also the moment when I started playing like him, because I
Yeah.
had my idea of what I'm supposed to do, and I basically put it in motion. Just do it as fast as possible. This is why I'm not playing this particular game as a stealth game, which I did in Dishonored. Both Dishonored I just played like a classic stealth game. Okay, so the last question will be, well, it's a tricky one. There is one thing that I think, from my perspective, is a missed opportunity in Deathloop, and it's the fact that there is only one solution to solving the
Mhm.
puzzle. You did mention, not you, but in general, Arkane mentioned that there are multiple ways. It's not exactly true, because there are multiple ways of solving certain puzzles, but the whole
Mhm.
main puzzle you have to solve in a single way. What would it take, except for extra 5 years, I suppose, to make it really completely how do you say it, free for the player to solve, that you could basically kind of manipulate the whole visionary thing in a different way than it was planned?
Just one of the realities of design is you need constraints. Constraints bring out the most of your creativity. And maybe this is drawing upon our experience in the Dishonored games when we were designing the non-lethal goals, is you always want to go with your best idea. You want the player to have the best experience possible, and also you just don't have the time, the team, the mental energy to try to do all the ideas. So sure, we will work out dozens of different iterations on what are the solutions to the puzzle, but in the end, you have to focus on the best, the most interesting, the most satisfying, the most like cohesive solution to the problem. So I knew as I was working on this for years that if we said, okay, let's go ahead and try to do the multiple solutions to the final loop, there's always going to be that one that's better than the others. It's just more interesting, it's more satisfying. But then you've spent all that time working on the others that you knew were less cool, and that takes away from the whole. So it's a question of just this, like you have to manage your own mental energy to say, I only have time or the headspace to do one thing really great. So okay, I see 3 different ways we could do this. This one is my favorite. I'm going to put all my energy into that one. And the other that's like from the creative side, but from the player side, what always seemed to make the experience a lot rougher was when you have two scenarios that are existing in parallel and they're competing with each other, and you don't know if this piece of content is related to this or that. And it gets all muddled, and maybe you solved it and you don't know why, because you still have these other clues over here. They don't seem to belong anywhere. So that's why, for example, in Wenji's lab, maybe I shouldn't be saying spoilers in these interviews, but the game is out or whatever.
We can do it a little.
Yeah,
it's a difficult game to spoil, by the way.
Yes. There's 2 problems to solve in Wenji's lab. And at one point, we realized that we needed to completely separate them. We need to put one behind a locked door and one over here. Because if they were occupying the same space, if you could discover, like, okay, here's puzzle 1 and puzzle 2. I found a clue for puzzle 1, and then I found a clue for puzzle 2, and then I found a clue for puzzle 1 again, and it's all getting mixed together. And now the player is losing track of what solution belongs to which answer. And then they just keep interacting with notes, they keep interacting in the environment, and then bing, they've solved something. Like, but what about all this other stuff? It makes the experience is rougher. So
it's more cloudy, so to speak.
Yeah, it's more cloudy. So
it's a good answer.
Okay, I'm glad you understand. It's a really tough decision to make. To say, let's focus on just this. Let's make this as good as possible.
I would call it streamlining your main quest line, if that makes sense.
And like Dishonored, there's really only one non-lethal solution to each character. It's the same principle.
What will Arkane do now? What will you do now?
We are going to keep working on improvements to Deathloop. We just had Game Update 1 come out. We know there's more feedback coming in. There's more data to sort through, more reviews to read, more comments online to read, to figure out what else we could do. But other than that, I can't really say.
lips sealed. Okay, listen, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you, and again, thank you for your contribution to my life as well.
Oh, my pleasure.
You took a lot of hours from my life. I don't feel I lost them, but you took a lot of it.
Good.
I wish you the Game of the Year award, because I strongly think that this is the best candidate this year, and not only because of the lack of others. There will be some for sure. This is really an amazing title. Although I must say that the first hours were difficult, and I think you guys got that from the feedback as well. The beginning is kind of rough, and there's this moment when it clicks, and then you realize
yes.
what
Yeah.
kind of a game it is.
Yeah. The
So
challenge
again,
is to get you to that moment where it clicks.
again, thank you very much, and I hope I will have an opportunity to talk with you again on the next game.
Oh, of course. With pleasure.